Hello, Simon Jones here. Apologies for not doing one of these for a while. I've been rather busy. Anyway, I'm hoping to get back into it with more frequent videos and articles on Potential Gamer. And I figured a look at the Mafia II demo was as good a time to get back into it as any. Some of you might not be familiar with the original Mafia. It was a game that came out in 2002 on the PC, so a long time ago. It came out in 2004 on the Xbox and PS2, but I don't think it made quite such an impact there as it did on the PC, where it was hailed quite rightly as a classic, although it didn't sell anything like as much as the GTA games. If you played the first one, you probably already know why it's a classic, as long as you got past the initial impression of the really slow, clunky cars, which by the way were actually kind of cool, because they were authentic 1920s vehicles, in that they were meant to be rubbish. Of course, not so great when you've just come from the GTA games and are roaring around in Ferraris, and then you load up Mafia, and you've got this kind of rust bucket that can barely get up a hill. In fact, I think some of the cars couldn't get up hills. Once you got past that, though, you realise that it was a very different kind of structured game. Whereas the GTA games have this open world in which you can go around and pick up quests from different people, the Mafia games are very much a kind of linear narrative which just happens to play out in this larger open world city. So you always push through it at the particular pace the game wants. You don't really have the kind of day-night cycle tactic of the GTA games. You know, every time you start a mission, you have to traverse the city and go through it, but it will be designed to be at night or during the day or whatever. So it's a much more controlled kind of storytelling experience. So, Mafia II is trying to do the same kind of thing. You can see that the actual recreation of this 1950s world, so slightly later than the original, it's very authentic. You're instantly through the music and the dialogue and the setting and the cars and even the lighting. It all feels like that kind of 1950s idealistic urban America. As you can see on screen at the moment, this is the big city map that in the full game you'll get to explore. In the demo you just get the far left section. As I mentioned, the demo is available on PC through Steam, as well as on Xbox and PS3. I've heard that there's some performance issues on the console versions, but the PC one plays extremely smoothly as long as you've got a fairly modern kind of rig. The actual capture I've got here isn't as smooth as the full thing, just due to the nature of the technique I used to get the video. So here we go. Instantly you can see that the cars are slightly more exciting than they were in the first game. Quite often these open world games live and die on the interactions that happen. As you can see, big car crash in front of me, wasn't really expecting that. Unfortunately nothing really came of it. I kind of expected those characters to get out of their cars and have a bit of a tiff. And despite that example there, that kind of thing does happen. You do see stuff going on in the city around you. And it does feel alive, and that there's stuff happening that isn't to do with you, which is always really important in these games. Try to ignore my really bad driving there. Although the cars are faster, they still feel kind of sluggish and heavy, and in some ways that feels nicely realistic. And you know, these weren't performance cars back in the 50s. They looked great, but they were kind of like bricks on wheels. There's the police. Now this is interesting because in the first game, something that it got a lot of flack for was the harshness of the police system, in that if you kind of sped too much, if you went across a red light, you'd have the whole police force coming down on you. What they've done here is lessen the impact of the police, but they still are there, and they still give you penalties if you start behaving like a thug. As you can see here, I'm just decided to pick a fight with this poor guy on the street, so we're having a scrap. Policeman comes up, breaks it apart, stops us fighting, and now you've got an option. Do you resist arrest, which is, you know, the only thing you can do in GTA is resist arrest and cause a ruckus and try and get away, or I can do this.
We can work this out, you know, without the paperwork.
Alright, I'll get out of here before I change my mind.
So yeah, pay him a little bribe, he forgets all about it, and off we go. What's interesting here is he then goes off after the guy that I was fighting, because as far as the policeman was concerned, we were both having a scrap, so you know, he's telling him off as well. For some reason he gets off with a verbal warning, maybe because he didn't start the fight. So, the demo gives you 10 minutes of exploring the city, but what I'm actually going to look at here is the mission that you get provided with. So let's jump in the car and go and find the place where you'll start off. On the way you get to take in the lovely vista of the city. As you can see, it's very much modelled around the kind of New York template. Presumably in the full game you get to explore everything that you can see here. There's lots of stuff, even in the demo there's little shops and bars and restaurants you can go in. You can go and change your clothes, you can upgrade your car and get better wheels and better engines and that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of little bits and pieces going on all over the place. Whether there'll be the kind of side quests and stuff that you encounter in GTA games, I'm not sure. As you can see, my driving coming into play again. What you might have noticed there is the little bits of debris that landed on the car, which now just flew off. That's the kind of advanced physics they've put in, which work really nicely, especially once you get into a firefight and you've got bits of brick and windows and everything flying all over the place. And unlike most games where all that kind of debris disappears about 5 seconds later and just vanishes, in this one it stays there and really lingers, so by the time you've had a firefight or a big crash, the whole place looks like a mess. So let's watch a nice little cutscene.
Where you from, Henry?
Sicily.
What brought you to the States?
Mussolini.
We buy you a ticket.
Don't be a smart-ass, Joe. My father was a man of honor. Things got pretty bad for us after Mussolini came into power. My old man figured I'd either get drafted or locked up. So he sent me to America and got me a job working for Clementi. Vito, aim for the fat bastard. We gotta nail him before he gets in the building. Get ready.
All right, I'm on.
They got
All
guns!
right, showtime.
They got guns! Up there in that window!
So yeah, that went really well. So now we get our first firefight with a nice big gun. As you can see, it's ripping up the train, killing people fairly easily. You can see that car's getting blown to pieces, tyres going down, stuff coming off the doors and walls. Shoot them enough, they do that, which is kind of cool. So yeah, we kind of destroyed that whole area. Now you get to see some of the combat in action, which works really well. It's kind of got all the stuff you expect from a modern third-person shooter. That guy's kind of gone down the stairs there. There's little incidental bits like that here and there, which work really nicely. Little scripted events. So yeah, you've got a cover system, which you can see me here using completely wrong and hiding behind the banister. As usual with these cover systems, every so often you will stick to the wrong thing. But in Mafia it seems to happen less than in some of the other games I've played, certainly more than GTA 4, where I found myself constantly running into walls, getting stuck on doorways, never quite knowing where I was supposed to be going. In this one you feel like you've got a much more kind of solid control of your character. As you can see, bits of glass and stuff all over my car, all over the floor and everywhere. It really gives the environments a sense of being kind of real. And I just trod in his blood, which is kind of unpleasant. But you know, it's the Mafia. It's not meant to be particularly pleasant. So in we go, and the big fight that is the main part of the demo kicks off. As you can see, parts of the walls being destroyed, and it all goes completely manic. So let's talk about that cutscene a little bit more. You get this nice kind of 2-minute dramatic scene between the characters. All three characters fairly well defined, certainly visually they look completely different. What the first Mafia really excelled at was its story. So even though the cars were kind of clunky and it was incredibly difficult in some of the combat, and you know in some areas it was inferior to the GTA, it didn't have the graphics level that those games had at the time. Where it succeeded was the story. It was so well written and the narrative flowed in a way that you didn't really see in games back then. You know, these days we do get some really good achievements in storytelling in computer games, but Mafia, which was 2002, so this was a long time ago, this told a really epic, involving story where, you know, you felt invested in your character and in the supporting characters. There were some really kind of tragic moments where you felt every single death. That looked kind of painful. And the main thing that I'm hoping for Mafia 2 is to get that experience, because GTA 4, while I loved it, there came a certain point where I didn't really care about the characters or the story anymore. It was still fun, but it kind of goes on for so long and there's such a big cast and it's so sprawling and becomes increasingly unrealistic and ridiculous that you kind of lose that connection to the characters. With Mafia, it always stayed grounded, and that's something I'm hoping for here. As you can see, the lighting and the graphical fidelity is really top notch on here. Even though the first Mafia game was, you know, kind of a small production compared to the GTA games, you can really see that 2K have put everything into Mafia 2. It's got, you know, all the love and care that you can get from any AAA big blockbuster game. Anyway, suffice it to say that from the demo, Mafia 2 is looking very promising. I know some people on consoles haven't reacted too well to it, partly because of the performance issues. Hopefully they'll fix those for the actual release. The other thing to remember is that the first Mafia game was a kind of slow burn game. It was one where all the individual pieces added up to a much bigger experience than you might expect. So looking at a demo won't give you the full experience. What's going to really work here is once everything comes together into the full game to create hopefully a classic and really memorable experience. So we shall find out at the end of the month when it comes out on all platforms all over the place. So no doubt I will be doing a review at some point. Meanwhile, keep checking back on potentialgamer.com for more videos like this. Thank you for listening and watching. Cheers!